Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session. My name is Paul Ashcroft. I'm one of the authors of the book, The Curious Advantage, and founder of a company called the Ludic Group. In the next 40 minutes, we will be having a conversation here with you about curiosity and about purpose. I'm here with Garrick Jones.
Hi, I'm one of the authors of The Curious Advantage.
And Tim Munden.
Hi, my name is Tim Munden. I'm the founder of Chiron, a company that works on purpose and leadership, and I used to be the Chief Learning Officer at Unilever. So why don't we start by getting you guys to talk a little bit about curiosity. You wrote a book, you've got a podcast. So Garrick, why do you think curiosity matters?
It's a great question. Curiosity was really our kind of COVID lockdown project. We'd written this book, we were ready to publish, and we had to kind of bring it all together. And then COVID happened, and our publishers were like deers in the headlights, and we decided to launch a podcast to kind of do the marketing. But then the podcast went through the roof. As you can imagine, being curiosity, we can talk to anybody about anything. And the reason we got to curiosity was we were very interested in a number of questions like, what the hell am I going to teach my children and my grandchildren about how to thrive and survive in the next coming era? What does education and learning look like in that era? And we did a sort of multidisciplinary research study with our third author, Simon Brown, who can't be with us today because he's starting his job. He's gone on from being the Global Learning Officer at Novartis to Global Learning Officer at Ernst & Young. And he's just started that yesterday, I think. But we were really wrestling with these questions about learning and the future. And we looked at neuroscience and anthropology, and we looked at history and sociology. I mean, you name it. Very, very broad psychology, very broad research, and then we started to do some factor and cluster analysis and so on. And we realized that it wasn't about learning that was the greatest driver of value, it was curiosity. And that's how we landed on. Once we got there, then the rest of it started to unpack itself for us.
So curiosity as a driver of learning. And Paul, why do you think curiosity matters for you? Why do you think it's important?
Well, I mean, personally, why it matters to me, I think it's a shame that as we get older, we become less and less curious. I don't know if you know, but there's a lovely study done quite a while ago about when we're most curious as humans. Have a guess what age you might be when you're most curious. Yes, at the front, what would you say? Put your hands up, you're going to go for 5, 4, 5. You've seen us before, haven't you? Yeah. We're most curious when we're 4 years old. If you do a survey of adults, only about 2% are as curious as they were when they were children, which is a little bit sad, right? Because, as Garrett says, in a world where technology is taking jobs, automation is changing the way we work, and we're asked to forever learn more skills, learn faster, and so on. Curiosity we kind of came to as a really helpful skill set that we can develop in order to speed up our learning, make decisions faster, build better relationships, connect better with others. So it just came with so many benefits that really help us essentially stay relevant as humans in a digital world.
And you're bringing to mind, and I read last week an FT article. They got some Hayes data on the 5 most sought after skills. The first is communication and interpersonal skills. The other 4 are all some form of curiosity: agility, flexibility, learning. So it's driving that.
And there's some research that has come out in Harvard Business Review about how 50% of all skills required today are new to world skills in the last 5 years. 5 years ago, 50% of the skills that are required for people in the job market today didn't exist. And those are things like AI and you can, that kind of gamut of things. But 50% of all skills required in the job market are new to world skills. That's just remarkable. And how are we as humans to keep up with that? What traits do we need to be able to survive?
So you built a model in the book. Tell us a bit about that model and what you think curiosity is. Garrick, why don't you...
Well, the model is called the 7 C's. We had about 15 when we did our clusters, and of course, we through some very serious scholarly research, we got down to 7 C's. But of course, when we got to 7 C's, immediately the metaphor suggested itself to us about the 7 C's and sailing the 7 C's of curiosity. And so we've been using that ever since. And we have boats and pirates and all kinds of things that come into it. But the 7 C's essentially are these, and we think these are things everybody needs. You could do it from left to right, but you can also jump in at any point you want, because all of these things are needed to be curious or successfully curious. And there are things like being able to read context and understand how context grows like a tree in our minds and between people. And community, how do you connect with people who can take you into something you're curious about? Or curation, how do you edit when you've got too much information? What skills do you need to bring it down to the things that are most important? Creativity, we all know about how important that is, and how that links with construction. Construction is really about learning by doing, and the best way to learn things is to do them, to build them cheaply, fast, furious. And then criticality, which is one of my favorites, but how do you teach people to know, well, what they're following is true? How is it the right way to go forward? How do I step back from my data and go, that's rubbish? Or I'm just following that because it gives me pleasure. How do I know that what I'm learning is actually, learning should be uncomfortable. It should be uncomfortable. We learn better when we fight or flight, but learning should be uncomfortable. And our best learning is done when we're slightly edgy. And criticality really gives us fantastic skills to know how to do that. And then finally, Paul's favorite, which is confidence.
So tell us about that, Paul. Tell us a bit about confidence.
Well, confidence is one of my favorite because it sort of comes at the end of the model here, but it's also at the start. So sort of two sides of the same coin. I don't know if you've ever tried to be curious, or you have children and they're being curious. If you don't have confidence, then you're never going to even take that step, because being curious demands of you to try something new, to take a risk, to put yourself out there, right? And if you don't have the confidence to take that step, then you just stay where you are and nothing ever changes. But the curious thing is, as you try, as you put things out in the real world, as you give things a go, and you get a little bit of feedback and you see some success and people say, oh, I didn't know you spoke Spanish. Oh, I didn't know you know how to do that. Oh, could you give me a hand with the other? So your confidence grows. The other thing I really like about confidence is when we were looking into confidence, the question people always ask is, how can you build confidence? It's all very well to say, well, just be confident, Tim. Just go on, get on with it, sit on stage, be confident. The secret, so we've discovered through one of our podcasts, speaking to one of the guests about confidence, is not knowing that you can do something well, and just by practicing you can do it well, but knowing that you can do it when things go wrong. So there's a lot of research around deliberately putting in failure, things that get in the way, that knock you back, so that you know that you can do it in that moment, and then you have the resilience to keep going and keep being curious.
Yeah. We've got two stories. I mean, Paul always talks about rock climbing.
Can we talk about rock climbing?
Talk about rock climbing.
Does anybody do rock climbing here? Anybody yet? Oh, Joe, I know you do rock climbing. Exactly, yes. Joe's not on stage. I don't know why I saw you put your hand up. So, okay, if you ever learn how to do rock climbing, those crazy guys that climb the sheer cliffs out in America, which I honestly would not try to do myself. But the way to learn to climb a rock and build confidence in this, as you can probably imagine, is not wake up in the morning and go, the thing I'm going to do today is climb to the top of that rock. They climb up a little way, and then they let themselves deliberately fall back. And they climb up a little way further and let themselves deliberately fall back again. And essentially, you're not teaching yourself to climb, you're teaching yourself to fall. And I think that skill, and again, easy to say, but if you take at least this away from this conversation today and put that into practice and go, actually, I'm going to deliberately allow my teams to fail. I'm going to deliberately allow myself to get things wrong. Then see what that does in terms of unlocking people's confidence.
My story is about learning to play the piano because I'm a composer, amongst other things. And there are two schools that teach people how to play the piano. One is you repeat it over and over and over again, and hopefully that it goes in, and then you can play something. But the school that's most successful for professional pianists is teaching them to breathe. And what happens is, as you get to a difficult passage, your heart starts going up, and you'll start being anxious, and you might freeze. But by teaching you to breathe into the passages and create stories which you're breathing into, you become better at dealing with the potential failure, and you're able to manage your way through it. So they were always looking for the anxiety and then teaching you to deal with the anxiety in those moments.
So we were in a conference about learning with a room full of learning professionals who are no doubt thinking, so how do we take this back to our organisations? We're convinced curiosity fuels learning, learning fuels our ability to transform and be future fit. So the question is, what can organisations do in order to provoke, build curiosity? Garrick, do you want to start?
Well, the big change in learning, of course, is there's so much available today, so much can be made bespoke for individuals, and so much can be done online. Learning is completely different from what it used to be, and in many respects, the organizations are doing it for themselves rather than having it done to them, which is a big shift. The thing about curiosity in your organization is, yes, you can teach people models to be successfully curious, or you could do what Satya Nadella did at Microsoft, which is make his entire cultural program all about curiosity and being successfully curious and confident through it, changed his organization and changed the perception of the brand. IBM, who really trying to create the platforms for learning in the flow of work, which is a future that's coming very quickly to us, which is understanding that platforms which are harvesting data and what we call contextual data can start, and with AI tools, we couldn't do this 4 years ago, we can do it now. They can start sending information. If I'm in a lab doing some work, phase 3, and the AI tool goes, here are some studies from phase 3 and other research. Here is some stuff that might be useful at this point in your process. You suddenly realize how learning in the flow of work, bite-sized chunks of things that are useful to what I'm doing now, becomes valuable, and curiosity drives that. So as learning professionals, as we shift into this digital world, don't forget about the humans. You've got to teach people to be curious at the same time as putting in the platforms.
Paul, what would you add?
One thing that our co-author Simon Brown talks about that he implemented at Novartis was this idea of 100 hours of learning. And I don't know if any of you have this in your organisation. And Simon talks about it that it's not a target in a sense that people are measured. Did they do 100 hours of learning in a year, but a aspiration. And it wasn't that they had to go and do formal learning. They were very specific that any mode of learning counted. If they were doing something in their own time, if it was just a new skill they wanted to explore, and different modes of learning. It didn't have to be a classroom or self-learning. It could be a conversation with a colleague. It could be going and attending a conference or something like this. So it was about designing it into the culture of this. The other thing is about, from a leadership point of view, and it comes to, I think, sort of the confidence part, is about creating the psychological safety. So if you're leading teams, if you're a manager of a team, one of the things that we found that if you ask leaders, is your organisation curious? They'll say, yes, they are. We're all very curious here. We all got lots of time to go and do learning. And then you ask the folk in those organisations, say, no, don't have time for that. Far too busy doing our job. Thank you very much. Curiosity is just another thing to go and do.
Yeah.
What helps is for the leader to create that psychologically safe space and reinforce that so that actually this is what we want you to do. It means things like, I want you to try, I want you to fail. Some organizations you might know Google rewards failure, experimenting and failure.
It's a difficult one. I mean, we've got a fantastic podcast on just released with Amy Edmondson from, you'll know her, where she talks about psychological safety. We had a big conversation with military people recently who were going, this is just another thing to add to our already, my task list is ridiculous. Why should I add curiosity to it? And the conversation is about, you're not adding curiosity to anything.
Yeah.
You're building curiosity into your way of being a leader. I want to talk with you about leadership in a moment, because it's the thing. It's not about, that wonderful thing we say in English, a stitch in time to save nine. Curiosity is like that. If you build curious questions into your leadership, if you're working with your teams in a curious way, you move out of that, bring me 3 scenarios and I'll decide what the answer is. You move to a point where you're really allowing whoever has the knowledge in the room, and in this day and age, that could be the least powerful person in the room, given our access to knowledge.
One other thing to add is about questions. I don't know if you're aware, but where the expression, because whenever we say to people, we're talking about curiosity, they say, why would you do that? Curiosity killed the cat. Do you know this expression, curiosity killed the cat? Do you know where it comes from? That 16th century chap called William Shakespeare, in Much Ado About Nothing, wrote care killed the cat. So not curiosity, but they talked about care killed the cat, which is where they think this verse came from. But in his time, somebody who was just asking questions actually wasn't very popular. In fact, they tended to do very nasty things to people that were too curious back in William Shakespeare's time, and in some parts of the world, our time today. But the ability to ask better questions is one of the secrets to unlocking curiosity. Whether you're a child, whether you're a student learning, or whether you're an adult just getting back into learning, asking better questions. And the thing that really threw a light on that for me was with ChatGPT, which earlier this year people go, you heard of ChatGPT? Then we start asking, and everyone's nodding. And they say, has anyone tried becoming, doing the prompting and becoming a prompt engineer? And now people are like, yeah, I do that as well. But isn't it interesting that something like ChatGPT, which I don't know your reaction at the start of this year to that, but oh my God, basically fear. Either here's a whole new thing I have to learn, what's it going to do to my business? I have no idea what I'm going to do. Then gradually, I don't know if I could speak for many people, but most people I speak to say, well, I've sort of got the hang of this. It's actually quite easy to use, and it is quite helpful, these tools. But what I discovered was, the better the question I ask it, the better the answer I get. Exactly like curiosity. And this is a new skill that we've learned took it to New World Skills. This was something we hadn't even heard of in December. Now we are prompt engineers.
The incredible thing about curiosity as well is it's not only good for teams and good for organizations, good for individuals, but it's also good for our health and well-being. And there are lots of studies. This was a surprise. I mean, the psychological safety I get, but the idea that curiosity and that mindset actually has a physical impact on our vagus nerve and our medulla oblongata, and causes us to become more healthy and is good for our well-being, was a surprise for me. It really was.
There's lots of chemical reactions that go on in your body, which is very odd that they've been researching. So if you are curious about something, it stimulates dopamine in the brain. I'm sure you're all familiar with. Dopamine is the part of the reward circuitry. That essentially makes you want more. Essentially is the idea of anticipating something, not having it, but anticipating something and wanting more. And when you're curious about something, it triggers that same dopamine reaction, making you want more. So one tip is, if you're bored of something that you have to learn, or you have children and you're trying to get them to study something, if you can encourage them just to be curious about it, they will learn it faster and they'll remember it longer just by saying, okay, I am curious about this.
It's probably worthwhile just to say that we have a definition of curiosity, and our definition is specifically to have an attitude of wonder, but also a spirit of exploration. And it kind of goes with the 7 Seas metaphor, but an attitude of wonder. I wonder what's on top of the hill, or I wonder what the view is from the top of the hill. And a spirit of exploration. I'm going to walk up that hill to find out, because it's the spirit of exploration that really starts to teach us.
And that's where I think we start to connect to purpose. What drives people to explore? what drives people to move outside of what's familiar and what's comfortable, it has to have a positive force to get them to do it.
So you are an expert in really purposeful behavior or purpose, and you're encouraging leaders to have purpose, and you know that because there are also enormous benefits to be had from having purpose. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so we know from research studies that not just leaders, but anyone having purpose has all kinds of benefits. In the studies we did at Unilever, we found people who'd attended a one-day purpose program were 49% more motivated than the people who hadn't. They had 33% more satisfaction from their jobs, 27% more satisfaction from their lives. This is a one-day workshop on purpose. Improves satisfaction with your life by 27%. We have studies that show that people who have a deep sense of purpose, personal purpose, are 15% less likely to die in the decade that follows.
Really?
So there are health benefits. So human beings have a sense of purpose and need it expressed. And it also then drives resilience. It drives, one of the latest studies shows that people who have that sense of purpose at work are more productive. So these are hard benefits that organizations can get if they're able to help people connect to a sense of purpose and bring that into work.
And Tim, the work you do, I know, is not just that purpose is something aspirational that, difficult to get your arms around. You've got practical ways that leaders, organizations can start to build their purpose.
Maybe we should have a look at the three-legged stool, as we call it.
There we go.
So many organizations are trying to be purpose-driven, and a very good reason. Purpose-driven companies get significantly higher shareholder returns, they retain customers better, they get higher profitability, higher growth. So your business will perform better if it's purpose-driven. How do you do it? This is where the three-legged stool comes in. First of all, embed it in your strategy. So if you say you have a purpose, you've got to make that live in the business you choose to be in, how you run that business, the positions you take as an organization, the commitments you make in how you do things. So that's the first leg of it. The second leg then is you need to help your leaders lead from purpose, to know their own purpose, and to help the people in the company connect to that purpose, to articulate why being here matters. Because if you're going to turn up to work every day, whether it's at home or in an office, you want it to count. We know that 70% of people's sense of purpose comes from their work. So leaders doing that is the next step. And then the third step is helping people at scale in the organization find their purpose and then connect that to their work. So how can you give people the chance to find purpose and then make that their career plan, make that the basis of their personal development plan? How do you help them how do you put it in the culture? So making heroes of the people who really live the company's purpose in their own work.
Can you give us an example of a purposeful leader? What is different about a purposeful leader, or a leader who has purpose?
So a leader that has purpose is doing three things. They're really clear about their own purpose, and they're able to articulate to people why they do what they do. And if you're thinking about an era of massive change, which we are, having to lead organizations through change, people want to know, why am I following you? And we all have this fear, I think, of being led by ego-driven leaders who are only in it for themselves. It's everyone's nightmare. I go to work for 10 hours a day in order that this person's ego is assuaged. That's not fun at all. So what purposeful leadership does is help people understand why you're really in it. It builds engagement and followership. The second thing then is making clear what the purpose of the organization is and why that's so worthwhile. Why should you get out of bed every day to go work for this organization? How does this make the world a better place? How does it make the lives of our customers and our consumers better? Second thing. And then the third thing is helping people to make the connection of their own purpose to that work that you've got. That's purpose-driven leadership.
Tim, let's click into embedding culture. You talk about this as enable everyone to explore their purpose, drive development, drive well-being. Tell us a bit more about that. What are some of the best examples you've seen of where organizations have done that?
So what we did at Unilever was give everybody the chance to do this one-day workshop. 56,000 people did it. And in fact, now nearer 60,000 people. So imagine 60,000 people doing a one-day workshop. We did randomized controlled trials, which I referred to earlier, to prove that it was worthwhile. benefits to resilience, to motivation. What we then ask people to do, so they come out of it with a sense of their own purpose. No one was forced to do this, by the way. People chose to do it. And what we then ask them to do is to build a development plan. We call it a future fit plan. I think everybody in the world needs a future fit plan, with the world changing the way that it is. And the future fit plan basically says, what's your purpose? So in my case, it's to nurture deeply human possibility. What are the experiences you want to have that are going to help you live that purpose? Well, I want to run a consulting business. People can name anything. What are the experiences you want to have? Part of those experiences should be in the business, but others could be things in their own lives. Then what are the skills you need, the capabilities you need to build to be able to do those things? And before you know it, you've got a person with a development plan that they care about. Because I don't know about you as learning professionals, my experience of being a chief learning officer was a constant kind of chorus of, we don't have time for this. And I think that's what happens when people feel they're being pushed into learning. But when the learning is driving their purpose, what they're expressing, then they've got time for it.
For sure. It reminds me of another saying, you've got to slow down in order to speed up.
Yes.
And it's so important to pay attention to ourselves. I was laughing at myself at your future fit plan, because I have a future fit plan, in as much as I intend to be fit at some point in the future, which is not entirely true. But these things really hit home. The other thing I'm thinking about, what's the connection between curiosity and purpose in your mind?
So I think they relate very closely. So if you think about the human being has a physical part with bodies, with mental part, ideas, learning, emotional part. At the core of the emotional part is purpose. What really puts us into motion is what matters to us, how we frame success. I think what really activates the mental part of a human being is curiosity. That's what gets us engaging with the world. I think what both purpose and curiosity do is put you in the context of the world, not you at the centre, but you as part of. But it gives you this view out into the world, a desire to go out and explore and learn and connect. I've run purpose workshops for 20 years, hundreds and hundreds of them. I've hardly ever heard somebody with a purpose that is completely selfish. Because human beings are not like that. We are naturally social and naturally kind of community. So I think purpose turns us out. Curiosity turns us outwards to the world in a spirit of humility and community.
What do you think?
I agree. I think there is something, purpose sits at the heart of that definition of curiosity for me. The idea that I have an attitude of wonder and a spirit of exploration. I tell you where I got that from. I had a lovely granny, as we all did, and one day she had in the back of her farm, she had a hill. And as a child, I said to her, I wonder what was at the top of the hill. And the next day, I was put in some firm, sturdy boots without being consulted, and the two of us walked to the top of the hill, which killed me at the time. But we got there, and I learned an extremely valuable lesson, which I'm very grateful for, because I still think about it. And of course, the view was amazing from the top of the hill. But purpose is at that point of shifting from I wonder what is there to having an attitude of exploration. It's purpose which goes, I'm going to put on my boots and I'm going to walk up that hill because there's something I want to achieve. And again, purpose, it's the process that's more important than the outcome at the end of the day. Having that sense of purpose is unbelievably attractive to other people.
Yes.
And as a leader, it's what draws people to you.
Yeah.
I know we had a very interesting conversation last year about the connection between growth mindset, curiosity, and purpose. A Carol Dweck's
Another
work
fantastic podcast
on growth mindset, and I think we landed on growth mindset is sort of the starting point. If you don't have a growth mindset, you're going to be, as I remind my daughter most days, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Purpose is perhaps where you're trying to get to, and curiosity is the journey to get there. But what I wanted to ask you, as you are, and we find this, as you're on a curious journey, things change.
Yeah.
You start off wanting to learn jazz, you end up learning rock and pop. You want to go live in Italy, you end up living in France.
Yeah.
Right? Or other places. What happens if you, as you're on the journey, you start to reassess your purpose? How does that connect with, I have to have a purpose, I have to have a goal, and I have to go after it no matter what?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think purpose is becoming more fashionable, and there is a slight danger, particularly amongst the younger generation, that it's become another thing they've got to have one of. It's another thing to worry about, to put on the to-do list. But actually, we all have a sense of purpose. We're human. It's core to who we are, to want meaning in our lives. The question then really is discovering it and expressing it. I think purpose is relatively stable, but it evolves, and the more you live it, the more you discover about it, and the shape it takes varies. And the stages of life when much of our purposeful energy goes into our loved ones, our children, and then it kind of shifts out as we get older and into the community and into our work. And so I think the purpose itself evolves gently, particularly as you live it, but how it shows up can evolve a lot over a lifetime. And that's, I think, the thing that we can harness in workplaces is helping people find that sense of purpose in their lives. And then because they found it at work, you get it flows also into work.
Should we ask some
Yes.
questions from the audience? Does anybody here have a question for us, or not only a question, but also do we need a mic?
And I think there's mics coming round. If that's Toby, if that's okay, you got it.
It's coming.
Yeah.
It might be a question. It might be a
Maybe,
statement. It might be a contribution to the conversation. It doesn't matter.
Hello. Thank you for that. Very insightful. My question is, how would you tap into leaders and managers whose argument really is, we don't have time for this?
I have a great. I was just doing, if I may, quite a session with the military group, who were very, very. We've got no time. We're busy. How do you put curiosity on top of all of this? And the story I came up with, which I'm very proud of, was about Captain Sully. And Captain Sully landed his plane on the Hudson. When they did all the psych tests after to find out how did he manage to achieve this, it turns out that even within the security protocols and the risk protocols of flying a plane, every day he went into work in his cockpit, he asked himself, what can I learn today? Simple question. He was in a habit of doing it. And he tried to learn actively something new every time. Which meant when he came to the point where he had 2 minutes and 32 seconds to make a decision after a bird strike, he had hundreds of options open to him because simply he'd asked himself, what can I learn on a daily basis? And to me, that kind of made it clear that you can be curious no matter what the protocols, no matter how difficult your job is or what the security is required. You may be completely open, but you might be within a very tight frame. But you can still be curious. And that's the thing that will save you at the end of the day.
And I come to Tim to answer this as well, because it's a great question. There's some specific data that they saw in Novartis, that around 25% gap between people who had managers they described as having, being curious, encouraged them to be curious, 25% gap in their engagement at work and their effectiveness at work, whereas if they have managers that are not. So there's quite specific data that says if you have a manager who is encouraging you to be curious, then it's going to make a difference to the bottom line. But Tim, what's your view?
I think there's lots of answers actually. So there's a self-interest, which is, we had data at Unilever that showed that people who learnt more were promoted faster. So we could correlate learning data with promotional data. So if you want to develop your career, be curious. The second answer I sometimes give people is, all you need to give me is a day. Give me a day and let people turn up if they want to, and then discover purpose. After that, it won't take any more time. After that, you're getting all that time back, because we know from the research they will be more productive, they'll be more motivated, more driven, more resilient. So all you have to do is get out of the way and let people come if they want to for one day, and the rest then sorts itself out. I find that human beings want purpose, and leaders who are switched on and connected to their people will know that. And if they're not connected to them, get them out of the way and just not object to people coming. I always say, just give me a day and we'll do the rest.
Great question.
There was another question at the front, Toby. Thank you.
Hi. Actually, it's two questions. Hopefully I'm not abusing. One is about curiosity, one is about purpose. The curiosity is, what in your mind are the biggest threats that prevents people from being curious? And the purpose question is, it's interesting when I was hearing a lot about like different generations and they said, oh, millennials, they have a sense of purpose. I think purpose has always existed, but just wanted to understand a little bit better that if we see an evolution in terms of how to address purpose across generations.
Okay.
What's the biggest threat? I think there's a psychological threat of fear, number one. People don't want to step outside of their comfort zone because they're afraid. That you have to work on personally. I think there is an existential threat to organizations that are dishing out tasks using software. So you pitch up at work, you get a bunch of tasks. You may not have much interaction with people other than emails. These tasks keep on flowing in your direction. You have no idea of the whole. You do all this nonsense and then you go home. And I think that's going to kill organizations. So handing over management to machines is probably not clever, but it will stop us being curious.
And I love the question because I would talk to this because it essentially says, well, that could be different for anybody, right? So for example, if you're a highly remote working organization, you're not making the time for people to come together, and I know there's many out there. In fact, we did a program last year where the deliberate thing was to bring people together for events, and they were worried they had to give out free this, free that, free, just to get people to come into the office because it's just non-cultural now. What do you lose? Community. This idea of connecting with each other, that water cooler moment, the idea just to have a conversation. As Garrick says, the ability just to drive results. I need this by 5 o'clock this afternoon. Where's the creativity? Where's the opportunity to try something different, to give it a go, right? So sometimes it's just a checklist and go, well, if I'm getting stuck, where am I getting stuck?
I want to have a go at that one as well before I go to purpose. My biggest fear, and it's been on my mind walking around here, you know the fairy tale of the goose and the golden eggs? Yeah, so they've got a goose, it lays golden eggs, they get greedy after a while and think, well, let's not wait for a golden egg a day, let's go kill the goose and get all the eggs out. And they kill the goose and there's no eggs inside. I worry that many companies, many organizations are like the goose and the golden eggs at the moment. The golden eggs are productivity and growth and change and all those things that organizations need, of course they do. But we're not spending enough time feeding the goose. What gets people to do the thousands of e-learnings on show here? A sense of curiosity, that's the goose. What gets people to want to go the extra mile, to stay in your organisation, to be part of that community, to want to really make sure that every customer is delighted? Purpose. To get the golden egg of high performance, of good customer relationships, we need to feed the goose of purpose. And to your point, it is across the generations. Every generation wants purpose and meaning in their lives. What's happened is that the millennials and particularly Gen Zs are more willing to quit and go find it somewhere else. So when I started work, I was very purposeful about where I worked, the British Army, Unilever. I was willing to do pretty much what they asked me to do within the law. Now, young people are very focused that the work that they do is purposeful and they will quit and go somewhere else if they're not getting it. They're now transactional about the organisation and very intentional about the work, and I think we were slightly different. So it's showing up differently, but every human being needs purpose. We need meaning to be fulfilled and happy people.
Tim, I think that's a very nice way as we approach the close of our time to sort of summarise why we need purpose. Garrick, have you got why do we need curiosity? What would we leave folk here with today?
I think we need curiosity to lead meaningful lives. Simple as that. And there is a way to be successfully curious. There is a way to actually wander, but actually step out the front door and go and chase after it and see what you learn.
Lovely, thank you.
It's fun.
Thank you.
Frankly.
Folks, we're at time. Thank you very much for joining us. Tim, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you very much.
If you want to come and find us, we're at K150. Thank you for listening.